Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. In this show, together with our guests, we explore different ways in which we can develop a meaningful relationship with our bodies and minds and respond to the current state of the culture in a quest for more integrated and embodied perspectives. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain podcast. This is Matan Levkovich. For today's episode, I'm hosting Sean Green, who is a couples and relationship coach, trainer for communication and meditation, a father of 3 children, and a musician based in Vienna. Sean has spent thousands of hours meditating, practicing, and learning from many different traditions and schools on the inner path for over 20 years. His professional engagement are characterized by his calmness, clarity, and loving presence. He supports his client in experiencing authentic aliveness, connection, and inner peace. In our conversation, we explored the nature of communication, not just as a tool for exchanging information, but as the foundation of human connection. We talked about how communication extends beyond words, manifesting in movement, presence, and the unspoken rhythms of relationship. We discussed the tension between individual autonomy and the need for deep connection, and how modern society, with its hyper-individualism and digital mediations, has reshaped the ways we relate to one another. We talked about the impact of systems, economic, cultural, technological, on our ability to form meaningful relationships and maintain boundaries, and reflected on the paradox of contemporary life, how we are more connected than ever on a global scale, yet increasingly isolated in our day-to-day interactions. And through it all, we return to the question, what does it mean to be truly present in relationships with ourselves, with others, and with the structures that shapes our lives? And now I bring you Sean Green. Hello, Sean.
Hi, Matan.
How are you?
I'm good.
So let's be honest, second take.
Take, yeah. I like 2. 2 is a good number, It's my favorite number, actually.
Yeah, we had a little technical problem, and now we are good to start. So welcome to my show. It's good to have you here. Also, it's good to be having you here in person, even though it requires from me a long setup, which actually it's really, it's maybe a kind of a fantasy that one day I will have a studio that is already ready and people can just come. But now it requires this whole build-up. But I'm really excited to have you. We've been planning it for quite a while. And how are you?
I'm good. I like sitting here. I mean, the light is a little bit bright. It feels like I'm on stage, and you're 2 meters away from me. Like usually I like to get a little, I'm a more of a melting together kind of person. So I like to be closer.
Yeah, technical needs for the mics.
Technical needs, yeah, that's true. We need to be concerned about the mics, I guess.
Of course, yeah. My friend, maybe you can give me kind of a brief update. How are you doing? Where do I catch you right now? What are you busy with? Just kind of to check in.
Well, as in the first take, I must say that you catch me right now here, right, in this body, at this table. And I noticed some sweating, and I'm a little excited to be here. And why do I say that? Because I think that we ask each other, how you doing, And we immediately go into the head, explain some kind of life situation, work situation, relationship situation thing. And for me, I'm concerned with also landing in the moment, without neglect, not like, spiritual bypassing, everything is great in the moment, everything is good anyhow, like there's issues in the world. We know that,
There are issues in the present moment, yeah.
There are. Not here, in this moment. I mean, it's very comfortable here, but sometimes maybe we, in Austria or something, we relax too much into the present moment comfort of, in Vienna, everything is fine, So this is the present moment where you catch me here. And more like the life story situation is that you catch me in a bit of a shift. I do group work with about honest communication mostly, or about being present in the present moment with each other. That's my main focus. And now I'm also focusing a little bit more on couples coaching and relationship coaching. And there's also another project like a political project, let's say. It's in the start, where I have a little honest communication community, the Honest Hive it's called here in Vienna, and a subgroup from that has formed where we get together to talk about the political situation right now and to see can we aid or do something with our attitude, with our approach to communication. That's a little bit where you catch me.
A lot of things.
Oh yeah, always a lot of things with me. Busy person.
Yeah, I can imagine there's I want to, before we kind of dive into the conversation and different topics, I want to talk to you. Maybe you can also give the listener a brief introduction to what you do, what have you been studying, what have you been learning to be able to do what you do, and maybe also a little bit like what pulled you in that direction. So a little bit of a kind of a short bio, because I think I also never heard it.
Interesting.
So
here.
It would be also nice for me.
Well, I guess it will have a little bit of a biographical background. Well, as I said, I mostly work with groups or with couples, helping them to connect, I would say, with oneself and with the other person. And that mostly through communication. So it's groups in circles, talking to each other, talking circles, you could call it, or partner exercises. I have a technique that I call co-meditation, which I think we will get into some communication techniques later on. But for me, so where I come from, I originally come from a little bit more of this spiritual background, yoga, these things. And then therapy and communication has kind of come in through other doors and, mixed together some kind of cocktail. And that's what I do now. And apparently my organism is pretty good at being with people, holding space so that the truth can come out, and the truth is not only the mental truth, but the emotional truth, whatever is here right now, and facilitating connection. So I guess that's my job description. And that manifests in different ways. As I said, groups, couples, single people coaching, workshops, retreats. And I don't know if I need to get into the biography of how I got there.
If there is something that you feel that would be interesting to share, because we are here, and I'm a curious person.
You're a curious person.
So feel free.
Let me think. Now, right now, like it's not alive. So maybe
Sure.
It will come. That's actually something that I've learned is to trust that that what is really alive in me right now is the appropriate thing for the moment, but to feel that, I need to allow my mind to become quiet, settle down, and then see what comes naturally.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting what you're saying, because now this already brings an interesting point. Because certain things we tell so often that they become like a rehearsed phrase.
Like a mantra.
Yeah, I remember, like, for example, I had a choreography that I co-created with another woman here in Vienna. And part of the choreography was that I was telling a story that happened to me in my life. And it was about the time that I was in the Israeli army and a certain mental breakdown that I had there. And I kept telling this story so many times that at a certain point, the meaning for it in my life changed, because it was not anymore the actual story. The story became an art exit, part of an art performance. And then I tried to, and it altered my memory of the event. And at a certain moment, I realized that I have no actual embodied memory of the event. I just have the association for the stage for this event. So I think it's interesting what you're saying, because I don't know, I heard recently that the whole mechanism of perception is very much connected to linguistic and narrative. So it's definitely interesting to check what is real in me, and is it necessary to speak, but maybe you can also have some let's say your favorite choreography that you just
Yes.
spin, and then
Yeah.
it moves you forward, and then okay, the real stuff will come after.
So a few things come to mind when you say that. The one thing is that there's some research, right, that where they say that memories are not fixed, and that with every recounting of a memory, actually what we remember the next time is that recounting of the memory. So that's the process by which we can get very delusional about our past, because once you exaggerate a little bit there, you neglect to tell a little bit there, and then at some point 1 year later you've told the story 10 times, you actually believe it, So it's kind of freaky. So I guess that's just an invitation for us to be skeptical about our own memories, like about, especially when we want to assert something or say these people are right, wrong, whatever, these kind of things, we have to be very skeptical. That's the thing about memory. And the thing about this recounting loop that you said, like if you can see it as an art thing and you're like, oh, I'm doing it again. That's fun. It's great, But I guess mostly we don't do that, Mostly we're stuck in this inner loop and maybe, no, I'm this kind of person. Oh, no, these bad things happen to me, or I never managed to do that, or these kind of thought patterns. And it's not that it's true, certain things shaped our lives, early childhood trauma, relational trauma, and whatever. And that's true. So we have a certain makeup and certain characteristics, and I'm not saying to neglect that. I'm not like in this humanistic, positivistic kind of idea, like you can be anything and do anything. That's bullshit, But we can make our life harder than necessary by staying in this loop. That's just the question how to get out of the loop. And that's the whole work of therapy usually, or maybe of other self-development techniques, like in contact, you can maybe have some experiences to be like, wow, okay. Like, if what before was challenging for me now opened up and I have a new movement, like, whoa, interesting.
Maybe I can just steer a little bit the conversation and share a little bit like how did we meet and what brought me to have the desire to speak to you. So we met, I think maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago within the contact scene, and you chose to join one of the programs in the Movement Lab. And I remember that back then, I think you didn't have so much training in contact improvisation. But I remember that from the beginning, it was very easy to dance with you, which made me kind of curious, like how come somebody that doesn't have a lot of the technical tools have such easy time to communicate in movement? And it was clear that, okay, of course, communication is a thing in and of itself. You can have all the techniques in the world. It doesn't mean that you know how to apply them in real situation. And it was clear that you have very high communication skills. And they came very naturally also in the form of non-verbal physical communication. And back then, and maybe today I will change my mind, I used to always tell my student, look, I cannot teach you how to communicate. It's up to you. I'm giving you a frame where you can practice communication, and I can give you maybe tools, but at the end, it's like, I cannot make you a better communicator. You have to just practice it. And maybe on one hand, it's kind of my own maybe lack of competence in breaking down communication in the same way that I can break down a forward roll. And but also there is something in me that still want to hold that position.
Well, what is the position you want to hold? Is that you cannot teach it or you cannot learn it?
Is that as a teacher, that communication is a skill that need to be practiced by my students, and no, it doesn't matter how much tools I can give them, the actual practice is maybe superior to the theoretical framework around it. And maybe that's wrong.
Well, no, but it's the same as in dancing and in contact, right? Like in the end, you need to practice.
Yeah, of course. You
break down the role, just as you said, and then you take it apart, and then you need to put it back together. And not even then you're at the end yet. You need to get to a point where the role is just a thing that you do in between, in a jam, like woo woo, and then it just happens. And that's
of course. But I think that, and maybe that's where my ignorance comes to play, is that I perceive communication as something that the conception around it to be less visible or less important than the theoretical framework around contact improvisation, in the sense that and again, that in my mind, I see that it's maybe more important to simply practice and say, okay, I wanna improve the way I'm communicating, so I'm just gonna go ahead and engage in communication, rather than having a lot of theoretical framework. And I guess I'm very honest with my ignorance, and I feel that I can just give the example of the podcast, that before the podcast I didn't took so much time in listening. So just holding the podcast makes me realize listening is something that you can really practice.
Yeah, true.
So that's, but again, like, but I'm really happy to kind of elevate a bit my ignorance by this conversation. So maybe.
Well, no, I guess you can talk about communication on a meta level, right? And you can have these tools and this, like, do this and that, but communication is so intrinsic to what we do all day long, that I find it hard. Like, even if you practice nonviolent communication, or you this or that and the other, I think if you just have this framework and these thought patterns, it's very unlikely that they will change the way you communicate, because we do it all the day. Like, when dancing or contact improv is maybe a little bit different, because it's a very specific thing that you don't do all the time, and then you go into a space and you haven't done it before, and then you learn some techniques and then you try it out. You're not as not biased. Like, there's not so much baggage, communicating we do all the time.
Exactly. That's what I mean. There is a teacher that was in my dance school, and they had they're a couple, and they had, I think, a sentence, maybe it's on the website, or maybe I've seen it on a t-shirt they printed or something, that like, you cannot not communicate. And I feel that it's almost like such an intrinsic part of being human, because you are going around and you're in whatever environment, and just by being in the environment, you're already communicating whether you're aware or not. So it's almost like trying to separate, separate something that is so infused with your being and so much connected to really who you are as an individual, and everything that you've been experienced and programmed. So how to separate that? That's what I mean. And contact is an activity. Communication, is it an activity, or is it just part of being alive? And that's what I mean with that question.
Well, communication is really what makes us human, like we cannot really say other animals communicate too, and we cannot really delve into their world. So we don't know, maybe whales communicate just as sophisticated as we do. It seems to be that way. But anyway, like, what we know for sure is that the way we humans developed, like, our big success story was communication, because we're social animals. We're not predators like that go alone, So the whole way we communicate and we have relationship together is what makes us us. So, like, even just to think of a human as a individual, like separate entity, kind of doesn't work, because as a separate entity, we would not be alive. And so that brings me to the next point. Like, we talk about communication, but in the end, it's about relationship, right? Like, because communication is just a means of connecting and of expressing maybe my needs, listening to your needs, seeing if we can help each other. But so the communication is not a end result or a goal in itself. The relationship is what it's about.
Yeah. So so communication in and of itself, if I'm hearing you correct, is just tools to cultivate relations.
So maybe that's a good point, because you can have communication workshops. You can break communication patterns apart the way you can do a dance sequence, but they will always seem a little sterile if it's separate from what it's all about in reality. And maybe that's also why it took me a while to get to this whole communication work, because most things that I read or learned about communication, they seem so artificial. Goes a little bit, because whereas the practice that I now, let's say, teach, or teaching is maybe the wrong word, that I want to cultivate with people, is seeing moment to moment what is present in me, what do I experience, what do I convey, and then how can we relate in a different way. And then maybe there's one or two techniques that can be helpful. There's some base concepts and practices that can be helpful, but it's really, currently I don't offer any kind of training, like learn to communicate in 8 steps or something, because I think it's bullshit, and
so wait, just kind of because my analytical mind likes to break things down, just a quick, maybe, I don't know if you already thought about it, but if communication is tool for cultivating relationship, so would you say that, why not to frame it, okay, I'm a relationship coach, like why the chose or it
well, I am kind of, that's what you asked me, where do you catch me? And I'm in the progress of actually switching to that, because you see, my workshops, or the format that I give groups in, I call it ehrlich sein, which means being honest, which is a little bit influenced from some work that I did before called radical honesty and blah. But these words, ehrlich, is more the communication aspect, right? Being honest. But sein is being, and somewhere in between that is the relationship somehow. And so I focused on that, and I focused on communication, and say, but now slowly I'm like, I don't know, the communication really is just a means to an end. In the end, it's about relationship. And when I say about relationship, so now I'm working more as a couples coach, because that's a very alive way we live a relationship in our society, let's say. This is very prominent.
Also the duet format is great.
The duet format is great. Though in contact info, like we don't always dance in 2, we also dance in 3 and 4, but 2 is pretty good.
It's a classic.
Well,
no, I think it's not just a classic. I think that something fundamental changes.
Yes.
From I'm with myself, that's a very unique thing. I'm with another person. And then for me, 3 and above, it's already group. Trio is a mini group.
Yes. So group dynamics are very different, and also maybe overwhelming at times, so that's, I guess that's why one-on-one is such a good, or let's say, integral or like so important to cultivate. And me, I do group work because, like, when you sit with 10 people in a group and you work together over a weekend and stuff, it's like amazing, like the connection that can be. But for the everyday, maybe one-on-one, so 2 people together is more common. But we said, like, why not communication? Why relationship? And for me, the interesting thing about relationship is that it's also about the relationship to me, right? Like to myself. So I said that I come a little bit from this spiritual yoga background, and there is always like enlightenment, awakening, and these things. But in the end, what do we want? We want to feel connected, right? So if we really, really feel connected to ourselves and to the environment and everything, then we feel at one.
Yeah, isn't it a synonym that enlightenment is just the ultimate connection?
Yeah, you could say. But the strange thing is that most people, or maybe a lot of people, or maybe I'm just projecting my own, trauma onto everybody else. We never know.
You can generalize in this podcast.
I will generalize and project my own stuff onto the whole world and have judgments.
That's fine.
But let's say something that I notice or that I imagine is prevalent out there is that people on the spiritual path or on the therapeutic path or on their whatever self-development success path, can think that they somehow can be self-sufficient and connected and in me, and the enlightenment thing is somehow the ultimate, I don't need anybody else kind of situation, right? I'm so at one, like, poof. but it's kind of stupid, right? It's about the ultimate connection. So how can the ultimate connection happen by myself somehow?
Yeah. I guess it's maybe a byproduct of hyper-individualism. This imagination that the ultimate experience is an inner bliss that is disconnected from everyone else. Yeah, it sounds kind of naive or pathological even. No?
It is probably, I like that you said the word hyper-individualism, or there's also, you could say, narcissistic tendencies in our society, maybe not pathological narcissism, but definite narcissistic tendencies, that studies have been made that just the average level of narcissism in the last 30, 40, 50 years has been on the rise in the West, right? Europe and America. And so there's, like, as a whole, as a society, the way we have our economy works, neoliberalism, the way our relationships work, the way we live, like separate, like single households, sometimes maybe small families, but not in the big family anymore, not in this 100 to 200 people kind of clan that we used to be in a city where there's 2 million people, like all this, there's so many strands that form together to make us so free-floating and kind of alone, basically. I mean, there's the loneliness epidemic, it's called, right? But the strange thing is that we still try to do it alone, right? Like, we think we can solve the being alone. And that's, I want to work a little bit, I don't know, against that, but I want to facilitate connection. And in contact improv, that's what we do, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think that, maybe one realization that I've been going in the last year is just the power of systems. And I'm saying it not because I think that everything around is corrupt, but just that there is a certain inherited power to the way things have been set up. Most of the time before you arrived. So many things that we are doing are kind of the result of other people's work. And it has a certain driving force that it's very hard to resist. And I think it relates to what you said, that, we are trying individually to solve the problem of being isolated. And that's a little bit paradoxical. But I think it's just very, very hard to change forces that are like, to deal with the momentum of how things have been set up. And also because they have certain, because it's sometimes, I think it's also hard to let go of the positive things that exist because of the system in order to change. And I think, Thomas Sowell, this famous Afro-American economist, said, there are no improvement, there are just compromises. And I think if what you just mentioned about living in a big tribe, I just came back now from 10 days in Israel, where whenever we fly, we mostly stay at my wife's parents, and they live in a small town in the suburbs of Jerusalem, where also Leali's brother and sister are living. So it's like already like a mini tribe there. The distance is walking distance. It's not in the same property, but still, like, there's a lot of family gathering. And I realized that what we do when we are there is just gossip. That's the main activity. We come and we speak whatever. Everybody speaks about everybody else, and that's. And I remember when I joined this family, it almost felt for me like, I cannot be myself here. There's always there's always the family pressure, and I need my individual space. And now, kind of years later, I'm so relaxed when I come there. I feel like, finally, like I can rest in this net. But I think that for many people who are very enjoying the benefits of hyper-individualism but feel lonely, it will be hard to do the swap, because then you really have to give up this freedom that comes with it, to be who you want to be, to organize your life how you want to be.
Well, I'm curious, like the organizing, I agree. Like, if you're part of a family or a little tribe or something, then you cannot organize the life just the way you want it. Compromises have to be made. But the being who you want to be thing, I would question, like we're just not used to it, So we're not used to being 100% ourselves in with many other people around, right? And that's also a big part of my work, to be like, hey, how can we kind of overcome this shame about how we are, about how we show up in this moment, about our emotions this very moment in contact with other people in a group, And we've made negative experiences in our childhood and in our past, and on a society level, just emotions, not all emotions are welcome, and so there's a good reason why we maintain and show up in this way. But theoretically, we could be 100% relaxed, just the way we are, even in a group, right? So that would be let's say, the goal to aspire to.
Maybe that would be like a more integrated state where you can. But I don't know. It feels for me almost as if part of existing within, part of relating. And we said, like, if communication is part of is like driving force for relationship, it feels that one property of a relationship is adaptation, and then what does it mean to adapt without compromising? Let's keep this word now, who you really are, because I don't really we have to break it down as well, because it feels for me almost like that. Okay, when when I go to contact improvisation jam, there is a certain set of acceptable norms, and I'm adapting to that. And when I'm at home with the family, there are different norms, and that's natural to adapt to it. And in both moments, there are things that I don't allow to show up. It's not that in the contact I'm really me. Also there are things I don't show up, because I'm just too complex to be always fully who I am. That's my experience in the world.
Well, I guess we would have to really delve into that fully who you are thing. But let's say, I think that for sure, the way, like, if we're in a hyper-individualistic world and the way we live, we're very much used to maintaining our boundaries in this way, And then if there's an intense group experience, we don't quite know how to maintain boundaries, even though we're close to each other, right? Like, so in olden times or in some other cultures, many people of one family would sleep together in one room, So, and then you still need to maintain some boundaries, because every individual is also an individual, but you just maintain your boundaries differently, like by just being quiet, and other people notice when you don't want to talk. You don't have to go to a separate room. They notice it.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
And or you turn away, and that, like in contact improv, we're in one room, like you don't necessarily run away to a different room to be alone. You just like close your eyes and you rest on the wall, and everybody else kind of accepts that and feels that.
It's almost like we've outsourced our boundary maintenance to physical spaces. And
to relationship structures, to ideas, to like, this you cannot do in the workspace. This you cannot do. Like, I'm not saying that you need to do everything in a workspace. Like all this, like, as you said, it's appropriate. Like, we get together for a certain thing. Now, a podcast recording, I'm not gonna undress and do a naked dance right now. Like,
you better not.
It might be super interesting, but it's fine to have let's say, roles and setups and certain boundaries around certain activities and in certain groups. That's fine. It's just that I guess we, as you said, we outsource too much of our boundaries.
But that's a very interesting perspective, because if you think about it, that a lot of the you have the again, this thought about how systems have their power and how they affect us. So on one hand, with this growth in wealth and material goods, we have the capacity to live in bigger spaces, and also these spaces enables each person their individual space. So the concept of privacy becomes a very important thing. And then if you put on top of it that we have digitalized communication, so we have created so many framework that we just don't have the space to practice basic things like boundary maintenance. And again, if communication is such an inherited part of life and we just don't have the capacity to practice it anymore, so then how can we not end up in a situation that that we just don't have these skills? I'm actually confronting. I'm going through a situation with my daughter where she needs to communicate with someone in her school, but she told me, "Wow, it's so embarrassing to do that." And I'm the only thing that I'm trying is just to encourage her to have the courage to be in that moment, because I think protecting her from that thing is just gonna it's just like anyhow where life goes, that we don't need to have the courage. Again, I think it's a lot because of the digital communication.
Yes, it's really a big problem. There's benefits of our wealth. It's kind of cool. A lot of things are very cool. Like take for example the possibility of women to separate from their men, right? Like if they don't want to live together because they can financially, like not so long ago, for most women, it was not possible, So that's good. But then, of course, it has its shadow side too, like that we're just much more readily separating, like all the time. Another thing that is very interesting is like, so in a society that we have built nowadays, marginalized groups, they have a better time, like if you're gay or if you're trans or whatever, like here now, if your closest people, your family that you come from, don't accept that, you kind of just go away from them and you find your new bubble, and that works well. And maybe in olden days you would have to conform to a certain way. So this, like,
but this is exactly my point about compromises, and I'm not here to argue against minority rights, but just to expose that yes, like there are compromises that are being built to those advantages, and the fact that you can separate easily,
it's a problem. It's a problem.
And I think that like one thing that maybe is for sure is that choose what is easy. We don't do every day the hardest choice we can. Comfort is the driving force. So if I can use an animal to work the land, I'm not going to carry it by my body anymore. And then that's it. We're going to have a different relationship with animals. We're not going to say, I'm altruistic and I'm not going to enslave any animal and I'm just going to... No, we're not doing it. That's why I think this whole, that's why I think, again, maybe it's that we won't give up the comfort. We won't decarbonize. Because comfort is really the driving force. And if you have the ability, and it's very easy for you to get along with your own identity, expression, and you say, look, I don't want to confront the critique that I'm receiving in my family, and that expands way beyond the, what you say, like being gay or whatever. I'm just talking generally, and I think I did it for years. I just had a very, very strong boundary between me and my parents, and it got to the point that I know my dad, that I love very much, and my mom, that I love very much, they are both very afraid to give me critique sometimes. I hear it from my wife sometimes. It kind of comes around, and so again, these are the compromises. You have easier time to disconnect yourself from something that is inherently part of who you are, which starts with family. And I think maybe that's another big issue. Not that we, it's not only the nuclear family, but this
the extended family or the original family. Yeah, I agree. It's too easy for us, nowadays to just go on our own, and then maybe like even another aspect is like many things that we used to need relationship for, we can now get by paying for it. Like before, you would, if you wanted somebody to listen to you, you had to have a friend that listens to you that you also listen to at some time, because otherwise they would do it. Or maybe your parents would listen to you, And if you wanted to have touch, like soothing touch or whatever, you would approach a friend and ask them, and then at some point they would be like, yeah, but I also want, and also regarding like maybe you don't have a car, you need a car, you have to call a friend to borrow a car. But when you borrow a car from a friend, at some point, like the relationship will feel skewed if you always borrow. Then maybe you have to invite them for dinner one day. So that's the normal way we humans would relate without money. And nowadays we can buy everything. It's crazy. And when you buy a thing, I mean, it's good. Also, it's also good. But it's also crazy because if you can pay for everything, it's again so easy. So then you neglect the relationships and you just have this interact like, yeah, I pay for the massage, I pay for the car sharing, I pay for the food, and that's why wealthy people sometimes they are even more lonely because it's so easy to just apparently get everything they want and need, but they don't. There's a big part missing. The whole relationship that would usually go along with sharing.
Yeah, and it brings me kind of into two questions. One is like that there is this discourse, and in some way we are also revolving around that topic without addressing it. Okay, what is human nature? Like, what is natural for us? And it feels for me more like human nature is like a very adaptive thing with some limitations, so we can really push what is normative very far, and that maybe now we are in the midst of a very deep process of change from something that is very much in relation to something that is in very much disconnection, and that the relation is on a digital way that is different, like that we are all super connected but also super disconnected at the same time, which is interesting, because if you think about it historically, humans were completely disconnected from one another globally. And if one tribe will meet another, if like one member of a tribe will appear somewhere else, most likely they will be physically murdered, and like it wasn't that peaceful. But we were extremely connected, and now in the small scale, and now we expanded it. That I feel like I'm part of this. I know what is happening everywhere, and I can have friends all over the globe, blah blah blah. But we are very much separated on the individual level. So we just swapped the scales.
Well, I guess we don't know how it's going to develop, right? So the whole idea of going back to the tribe, like it doesn't work, like you cannot be that traditional. We won't change. We probably won't go back to this kind of living unless environmental disaster forces us to, like that might happen. We don't know. But for sure, we can see that we've gone very far in one direction, and we are suffering. We're suffering because of that, because our organism is made for direct one-on-one, very close contact, physical, emotional, verbal, that we just hardly ever get from social media or from acquaintances or from watching Netflix, like even watching TV. Why do we watch so much TV? Like what is happening there?
It's an artificial way of experiencing relationships.
Exactly. So you watch people interacting, and but you're a little bit separate, so you don't.
And then you speak with your friends about it. You gossip. Then it becomes part of your, so to speak, reality.
Exactly.
Even though it's all made up.
Or you watch like some superheroes blow stuff up, and they express the anger that you're not able to express, or they like express the competence and I can do it kind of thing that you're not able to experience in your world. So we outsource our real life experience to this kind of, and I'm not saying I like to watch a Netflix series every now and then, it's fine. But if we would have more social interaction, we would watch less TV. It's because that's what we're made for. That's the thing, like, this development that you explained is happening, and we cannot wind it back, and it's just what is unfolding, and we will surely adapt, or we are adapting to new modes of communication and contact. But
inventing
inventing very, very fast, but our organism, maybe our brain is able to kind of keep up with it, but our emotions and our body are not able to keep up.
No, because they adapt very slowly. But yeah, I mean, talking about communication, we have these large language models now.
It's great. I love ChatGPT. Man, it's so good to talk to ChatGPT. You know, it's like very creative. I'm like, and it gives me such interesting advice, but but at the same time, it's not.
It doesn't care about you.
Well, it says the words. It feels like it cares about it. You know, like it's like very friendly words on the screen, you know, but in reality, it's just words. There's not. So that is a little bit in the direction that I was expressing before. Like it's like very convenient, helps on a superficial level, like the car sharing, like the going to the massage. Everything is very great, but there's like a deeper root that is missing somehow.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm not that optimistic, and I think it's really gonna exacerbate the problem of connection and communication. I've already seen people like talking about the therapeutic benefit of like chatting with AI, that you can kind of outsource therapy.
Yeah.
You know, or in coaching, and like many things you can outsource to this machine. And so and because it's so easy,
And easy helps.
it's not gonna it's not gonna stop people. The thought that it's maybe not the best, it's not gonna stop anybody. People will do it, and it's gonna change culture radically. I don't know how, of course, but if you enjoy the conversation so far and found it meaningful, please consider to share the episode with others and to click the like button. These small actions might seem meaningless, but they are the fuel that helps the podcast project to move forward. Your attention and time is highly valued, and we would love to hear more about the insights you might have from listening to this episode. And please consider to subscribe to the channel to be notified for all future uploads.
You can look at it at the therapeutic aspect even, you know, and it will get better and better, and it can actually fulfill certain therapeutic functions, right? And if you only look at the symptoms of one individual in that one moment, you can say like, oh, look, loneliness drops by this much %, you know, and like talking to AI or to this robot dog that can now also hear your emotions, and, you know, so you can look, seen on an individualistic, once again, viewpoint, it's true. It has these benefits. When you see it on a bigger scale, let's society, development, politics, or whatever, we need to be skeptical of it, because it just leads us further and further into this situation of being disconnected, you know, like from the. I mean, did you see the movie Her? I mean, it's quite like that's that, you know.
Yeah, but also I think that it also, I mean, specifically kind of addressing it, if you think about the paradigm of therapy, and maybe what I'm saying is not that precise, but at least that's what I've been told by several therapists, that the whole paradigm of therapy is based on the idea that the relationship that you cultivate with the therapist is the motor from which you actually go through the therapeutic process. So if you cut that thing and now you say like, okay, I don't need another human.
Yeah, no, it's of course.
And I have a machine that can say the same words that a human will say. Now I've changed something. It's like, it's you know, it's like you took the foundational level. You remove the relationship part from therapy to do therapy. So I don't know. But you know, like I want to steer us a little bit back into some things that even though I'm you know, I knew that I'm going to enjoy talking to you because we have very easy way to flow together, but I do want to get to certain things that are more kind of in the bread and butter of what you do. And when you came here to my home and I kind of introduced a little bit what we're going to talk, I kind of open up this question of like, what are key tools what are the key tools to developing listening skills and expression skills? And then we also talked about that maybe that's even the fundamental breakdown that needs to happen, that you need to understand like, what are you lacking? Because some people, as we said, kind of in a joking, some people really need to learn how to express themselves, and some people just need to learn how to shut up. So maybe you can kind of elaborate a little bit of like, what do you see when you teach people, when you work on communication? What would be your starting point, and how do you relate to this kind of binary split between listening and expressing?
Well, the starting point is always noticing what is happening inside you at this very moment, like feeling your body, noticing your emotions. That's the starting point, noticing your thoughts. Because how can you relate with another human being without noticing what is happening in you, right? And then from there, communication can ensue. And then it's about listening, but not just shutting up your mouth and having the voice talk in your head, but like really trying to feel the other person, like really trying to hear what they're saying oftentimes underneath the words, like really getting to the core. That's the listening skill. And the talking skill is to express myself, really myself, not like as a whole being, not just thoughts, but also body experience, emotions, other inner movements. And staying in myself when I express myself, not trying to change you, not talking so much about the world. I mean, it's great to talk about the world. We can do it if we're regulated. But if we're in an emotional disturbance, it's not good to talk about the world. And that's the world. Like most people that want to change the world, they're disbalanced in themselves. And whatever they do will just make everything more messy, And the same in relationship. We need to express ourselves, really ourselves, like our emotions and what's happening with us, to get to a good base level again, to really be able to feel our connection and the other person. So that's honest expression and honest listening.
So maybe you can elaborate then, what does it mean for you to be in contact? Because you said then we can really connect. Or what does it mean for you to really connect? Maybe it can be described by an example or situation if it's easier, because I think it's kind of, again, very fundamental.
Yeah, so it is very fundamental.
Easy to say, to give words to that experience.
Well, the contact aspect is noticing me, a human being, is here right now, right? Like I can feel my bum on the chair, a little bit of excitement, movement in my belly and my heart, cold hands. And I can also see you, another human being there in the room. So, and I can also be aware that I'm aware. There's some kind of instance that notices these things. And then I can be aware that there's something happening between us, a relationship, right? So I remember that you said something before and I said something before, and we know each other for a couple of years, and all this is stored somewhere. And something is being expressed here. And there's some kind of purpose to what I'm saying and what you're saying and what we're doing. So all these different levels of awareness can be there simultaneously, or maybe I need to break them apart at times. And all that actually flows into my communication with you and my listening to you. Is that very abstract?
No. No, not at all. So it sounds okay. Maybe I'll paraphrase it or look at it from a different perspective, because it feels for me like that the notion of being in contact, if I'm trying to describe it, is some state where there is a certain transcendence of boundaries.
Or a noticing of the boundary. Like you can only be in real contact if you feel the boundary.
Yeah, of course, I'm not saying overriding the boundaries. Like the boundaries exist as a starting point. If there are no boundaries, there cannot be connection because there's no separation yet. So it's like you didn't connect, you were one. Because exactly. So I think it's a necessary, let's say, prerequisite for connection is having a clear sense of boundaries. But then something happens with different tools, and suddenly there is an experience of transcendence. And I feel it can happen in a conversation when things are in a certain flow. It can happen in dancing. I know it can happen in sport. It can happen in, I don't know, many other types of activities.
Lovemaking.
Yeah. It can happen in many different ways. And even though it's clear, I still feel like that it's a mystery. The moment is, and like, it's almost like awareness to that process inhibits the process, but at the same time, you need to be aware. Because the moment you're like saying, interesting, now I'm transcending the boundaries, that's it. It's not happening like this, no? You're not in the meditator, observer mode that is like sitting and observing the reality, but at the same time, without any awareness, it can never happen. So it's almost like a very tricky thing.
Yeah, it's happening somewhere in the middle. So we have this capacity of moving back, getting into this meditator, witness, whatever, dissociative state, like moving back. And then we can associate again, move in again. But if we're only in there without moving back, we also don't quite get it, let's say, So the real contact happens when both of these can be present at the same time. And for that, we need to practice both modes, and then they're there simultaneously. The awareness is there, and the being is there.
Yeah, and it's maybe I'm kind of elaborating it because it's so fundamental and difficult to break down. But I think it's almost like, I guess that in my life, and I don't know if maybe you can also resonate it, it's really a driving force for many of the things that I do. So like in the way I live with my kids, I'm looking for the moment that we will be in that flow together. And it can be through a board game, or I know with my son, we like a lot to wrestle. It's the same thing about my relationship with my wife. Like I'm looking for the moments where we will finally not be separated adults that speak about stuff, that we are like one. When I go to dance, it's always like that. And it almost feel like as if, and that's maybe a bit spiritual bullshit. It's almost as if that's the nature of consciousness, and we are always trying to return to that home.
Yes.
Can you resonate with that
idea?
idea?
I don't think that's bullshit. I think you pretty much got it. I mean, there's a reason why we're all so fascinated by the romantic relationship. Because for most of us, or for many of us, in a romantic relationship and with bodily interaction, with sex and these things, that's for many of us where we mostly experience this oneness state. Others maybe through sports, that flow state, and or others through dancing or other activities. Or, of course, on the spiritual path, like that's what we aim for. And I imagine that it is our natural state, like that's just how we actually are. And then we learn to separate, and that's good. And then we would just really want to get back to it again.
So in a way, consciousness is almost like a traditionalist that wants to come back to what was there before.
Well,
before the separation.
Of course, there's these developmental stages, models, and whatever, and they always say that that once you've really learned this separateness and can embody it and can be separate, and then you get back into contact again, and as Jesus said, become as children again or whatever, you're not really back where you were.
It's not regression. It's not regression.
So it's just you go one direction, then the other direction, then you come back to the middle, and but you're on a like a spiral. You're on a different level.
Yeah, it's a process of integration. Yeah. One thing that you mentioned and we talked about, and I want to kind of also open it up. So what's the value or what's the value of communication technique? Or let's say even a step backward, like how do you break it down to people? Because if again, and I know it's very different if we kind of talk about it in the context of contact improvisation, that you're also a contact improvisation dancer, so you're also practicing it on a physical level. But so do you see it as a very different thing, or for you it's like, okay, there is the communication skill, and then I'm applying them in this?
It's not a different thing. Like when you apply to language, like non-verbal communication and verbal communication, they're both the same thing, basically. It's just different modes. And that's probably why when we met, and I didn't have so much contact impro technique, you still noticed that the relationship aspect or the being able to dance together was prominent. And I had some resistance to learning techniques in general, but in contact impro also, because a part of me is like, it's just techniques. I want to get down to the fundamentals and but just want to be. And then at some point I was like, oh, well, somehow your training came into my life. I was like, I'm going to try it, And same with music. I do a lot of music and then I had resistance to studying music and then I studied jazz, and because the problem with technique is always when you learn technique, then you're kind of moving away from the natural for a little while and everything becomes a little bit how does that work, and then you need to reintegrate it. So it's not the most comfortable move. Some people get security in technique. Me, I'm mostly irritated by it.
Meta technique or like the spirit of communication technique that could, in a way, because there are different modalities, like you mentioned the name radical honesty that was in your background, and I know of NVC,
yeah.
And I'm sure that there's many others modalities, but would you say that underneath them all there is a certain meta thing that is going on, that we come from different direction, or you can really say no, this modality is really messy and this modality works much better? Or like, how do you, because it's kind of in your field of work, how do you make sense of all these different approaches?
We would have to go into all these separate modalities to kind of say like, oh, this modality works on this and this, and it's good for this and this, and that is good for that and that. Also, depending on what kind of person you are, one approach maybe speaks to you more, So I don't know if I want to get into all that. Like, just briefly, for example, the honesty is mostly about expressing yourself, your emotions, being alive, out there, not caring so much about what other people think. That's, of course, it's not a wholesome way to live. Basically, it's just a therapeutic move, like you do it for a little while and then you drop that again and you can become more moderate again. NVC is a lot about needs, so and about expressing your needs, hearing the needs of other people, all sorts of techniques and ways of relating so we can communicate less violently, right?
Okay, so you would say that all these different modalities, they're just like dissecting communication into parts, that they are focused on that part, and there is no unifying narrative that you would say like, okay, at the end, this is the spirit of, if you like, you said it like you said it as a joke, hey, I'm not going to do like a 8-step to be the best communicator, but I am trying to ask if there is a certain thing that you say, look, that's the foundation. No matter which modality you're going to go, that's what you're going to confront, and that's a good tool to have in your pocket when talking about communication.
It's a tricky question, right? Because like you ask me, what is the common thing of all modalities? I don't know all modalities, like,
obviously.
And every modality comes out of a certain human being, right? In a certain setting, in a certain environment, and answers certain needs or relevant to that environment or to that situation or time even. And that's why it's hard to say what is the common ground of all of them. I mean, the common ground of everybody that works in communication, in this type of communication, I'll just elaborate what I mean by this type in a second, is that they want more connection, more authenticity, more aliveness. Like Marshall Rosenberg from Nonviolent Communication, he calls it the language of life. So I guess you could say that most of the communication techniques that I'm concerned with, that also maybe touch the whole therapeutic dimension, are concerned with using language to further life, to get further in touch with myself and you in service of life and not in service of becoming robots, right? But that's not all communication, because when you learn NLP, for example, maybe you will use communication in a manipulative way, so not all communication techniques share the same goal.
Values, yeah.
Not the same values.
That's a big thing, that language can be used to connect, but it can also be used to do the complete opposite, to instrumentalize others. And do you think that you became that because that's kind of what you've been rolling around? Do you think that it helped you to become more aware and your, let's say, alert system is more tuned to this type of communicate, like negative, let's call it negative communication?
In other people, to manipulation, to facade, to this kind of things. And also one big thing that I think for myself, and that I hope that people can take away too, is learning to trust that it's okay to be alive, and to be myself and to show myself that even though we wear a lot of masks in our society and sometimes feel like robots, that don't have to be that way to get by. We can be more authentic, and it's okay.
Because one thing that it kind of maybe I can share a very quick story. My wife and myself, when at a certain point my wife got in touch with some organization called I translated from Hebrew, like the House of Positive Parenthood or something like this. And they were offering NVC courses for parents in the context of having a better communication with their kids. And me being very analytical and cognitive person, I understood the tricks very quickly. Okay, so I don't need to speak about the behavior, I need to speak about the needs. All right, got it. Perfect in communication, black belt. Obviously, started to apply it, and I really noticed that there was a curve that in the beginning my kids really fell for the trick.
So it was a trick. See?
No, that's the thing, that in the beginning it really felt like, okay, well, when I'm directing the conversation from the behavior into like, hey, what's underneath that, there was more cooperation in the beginning. There was more, my needs as a parent met quicker, but very quickly they realized, okay, it's just another form of no.
They saw through the bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And my wife, I remember that, she has much harder time to hear something and quickly integrate it. But on the meta level, she was just much better in being in contact with the kids. And then it made me feel and question, like, okay, what's the benefit of the modality? And then, like, how not to fall into the trap of serving the technique. And do you have anything to comment? And like, what would, like when somebody kind of come to you and you give them some tool, like, how do you guide or how do you help people to not get trapped in that?
Well, that's why I don't give so many tools. Because I love NVC, and Rosenberg did a great job and all the people around that. But I always and still have some trouble connecting with it, like I really try, like I read the books, I listen to, like I go to trainings and everything, but it's always very technical, and Rosenberg himself is not technical, like you feel it. It's really felt expression, right? But the way it's being presented is very technical. You do this and this and needs and blah, and you do that. And for some people that might jive. For me, I like it on a certain level, but on another level, I'm more aware of exactly what you just expressed. It's just a new way of manipulating, really. So that's why I tend to veer a little bit more into the just express yourself authentically and the rest will follow kind of camp. Not 100%, but a little bit more, especially for close relationship. I more want to facilitate the trust that if we really express what's here right now, even if it's messy, even if, it's anger or every emotion, but stay in contact, not zap it out and then run away, that somehow we will find a way through that. And that awareness of needs is surely a very important thing, because that way maybe you don't throw your stuff onto the other person so much, you're more staying with yourself. But if it's like a mechanistic, always going to the needs instead of just like stomping your feet and shouting and being like, I'm so angry right now, but always like, my need for is not being met, when in reality you're angry.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a show, but yeah, it sounds to me, and I can totally understand that authenticity is the prerequisite then for connection, because again, otherwise,
who am I connecting to?
Exactly, like I'm not being real with myself. But this leads to another problem that, and maybe that's a bit kind of inevitable why it's already therapeutic, that sensing, being authentic with yourself has many, many layers and levels. And, I'll just give a very silly example, but I don't know if I, or maybe I'll give more vulnerable example. Okay, so I've been dealing with a certain addiction, and I realized that in certain moments, what I experience authentically is a certain thing that underneath it, there is something else that artificially I couldn't say like, that's my authentic need right now, and that's what that's how I would express myself authentically. But actually, that need or that way of expressing sit under something deeper that is actually connected to certain pain and certain things, and it's almost as if this very simple request, let's be authentic, is already like equivalent to, please do a life work of figuring out your shit.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a drawback of any kind of authentic expression thing can be some kind of superficial acting out kind of situation, right? You just act out everything in the moment, being like Trump or whatever, I'm just gonna puke on everybody. And that's authentic, right? But of course, it's only one layer. Underneath that is much more. Like, for example, underneath anger usually is some kind of pain, or you can say need. So there's different layers. But if you don't allow yourself to express the upper layer and always want to go to the lower level because it's more efficient, right? Or less messy in your thought, that will also not work. So we need to be okay with being superficial. I mean, it's not superficial. I hope you get it.
Yeah.
The upper authenticity layer, let's say, right? Like even okay with expressing my thoughts and saying like, oh, I have these judgmental thoughts about you, or I want to be like this and that, like showing myself. But then also getting to deeper layers of being like, oh, like, okay, this is my craving underneath, and this is my fear underneath, and more vulnerable. So good authenticity, good, contactful authenticity is always based on also being vulnerable.
But do you think, and that's again I'm kind of a bit ping-ponging to this question, like how improvable is it? Because sometimes I feel like maybe, if that maybe communication, if we kind of take, I don't know, this image of you have a computer game character and like, okay, how much score did he get in communication? 3. Okay. So that, because there is let's say if we bring it up, the autistic spectrum. I have a nephew that was on the autistic spectrum, and it's almost as if like, okay, there is a certain glass ceiling, you can get to the glass ceiling and that's gonna be it. And or if somebody had like a really, really, really severe trauma, then there's like, okay, you can never really restore the capacity, but you can kind of play with what there is. And do you also operate from that perspective that, okay, like certain people will never be amazing in connecting to others than others, and it's just what there is? Or do you think that what is the degree of malleability that we can actually
well, I don't know statistically, right?
No, just from your experience with working with people and seeing changes in people and like.
Well, I think if you really want to change, you need to do some really deep work, basically, right? And some things will never change, you know. If you're autistic, if you have this and that, it will probably never change. But that doesn't mean that you cannot change your way of relating, your way of connecting, your experience of yourself with other people. I think there's a lot of potential for change. But you need to do the work, you know, like, and so one weekend workshop or will just not cut it, you know. And but the good thing about working with communication is that we do it all day long, you know. And
you can always
work on that, you know. And you can always be a little bit more yourself. You can always try to understand the other person a little bit more. You can always try to show yourself a little bit more, or try to say something that's a little bit uncomfortable. There's always, so that's a little bit what drew me to this work also, because I came from the spiritual thing where we're meditating and being blissed out, and then going outside of the seminar setting, and then it kind of deteriorates so quickly, and then we're the same again. But the communication thing is happening all the time, so it's a great field to work with.
It's a great tool to sharpen.
Yeah, and so we can always help each other becoming more aware of what is alive right now in ourselves and in the other person through open-hearted communication, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess it's also requires some, let's call it cultural shifts, or some, because again, as you said, like the willingness to reflect on it is fundamental. Without the willingness, you're just kind of, that's my system, take it or leave it. And I guess that it's you know, and you said it before, like that we talk a lot about doing changes in the world. And right now, when I was in Israel, I got in touch virtually with some guy who is started another grassroots movement for peace in Israel. And this guy, Mao Zinon, his two parents were murdered in the 7th of October attack. And his reaction to it was like, I don't want revenge. And he started a movement. And I think that what was very interesting to hear about his story is that something internal happened to him. Now, you know, some people said, it's just his reaction to this trauma. It's like, that's how he can deal with it. I am more convinced by listening to him that he really experienced some epiphany, something cracked in his consciousness, and that he really could be in this state of, I'm going to do everything that I can to create peace. But something internal happened. And I think that this is the thing that is so, like, we are so prone to speak about external things, about system, but the inner work that is required to actually make changes, you know, like, it's not separable. Like I think about the 4 quadrants model of Ken Wilber. I think you know this. So like you have your internal experience, your behavior, the culture, and the structures. And if you change something on one of them, it will slowly shift. And I think that the hardest thing to shift is the internal space. You can change habits. You can decide from tomorrow, I'm only eating vegan. And you can make this radical choice from one day to the other. Will you do a certain inner adaptation to your diet? It's going to take a lot of time. You cannot decide from tomorrow, I'm not getting angry anymore. It's not. And that's a very tricky thing. And I think it's great to see. I think that's what is great about the outlet of your work, that it really directly invite people to look at that thing that is.
So the thing with cultural and outer change, I'm not in the camp of saying we don't need to look at that and everybody just needs to do therapy and meditate and everything will be good, because it's not like that. Outer work is necessary, right? But more fundamental is the inner work. And when I talk about the inner work, I also, once again, don't talk about being alone, but about relationship work, like alone and relationship. Like that's like going back and forth, And and that's where we can all start. How do we relate to our nearest human beings? How do we relate in a peaceful way, and then also to myself. But the relating to myself is a meta skill that actually comes from relating outside, like we learn who we are through social interaction as human beings. And we learn how to talk to ourselves and how to view ourselves through our interactions. And as you said before, therapeutic setting is also a relationship setting. So to think that maybe I just need to read my books and then change my habits and then ask myself these 3 questions every day and that will radically change me, and then meditate and do breath work. Bullshit, like we need to change the way we interact. That's where real change happens.
Yeah, I think what I'm kind of taking from this conversation is like it helps me to verbalize certain intuition that I have, that is like, if you want to know a person, you need to see like what are the relation they have in their life, and that's a good indication to who they are, and it's probably impossible to really have pathological relationship with people and at the same time claim to be a super healthy, inspiring person.
That's bullshit. Like all these yoga teachers, that abuse their students in some either power or sex or whatever and claim to be enlightened. It's bullshit. Like real enlightened people are super open, heartful, and funny. They have to be funny. If they're not funny, they haven't cracked the code.
I don't remember who said it, but like it also kind of come from another perspective that like dictators have no sense of humor.
No,
and I think that that's definitely
because you cannot take yourself seriously when you laugh.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, Sean, I think we will soon wrap it up. We already been talking for almost an hour and a half, and I would like to give you some stage to maybe share with people who are interested with this conversation, how they can get in touch with you, what is happening, like the different offers, so kind of to share a little bit about your platform.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you. So on seangreen.at, that's where you can find my offers. Relationship coaching, so couples coaching, or also for individuals, like because we also need to figure out how is my relationship to myself, how was my relationship to my parents and stuff. That can also be helpful. So I do for couples and for individuals. And then I do groups, regular groups about honest communication and also about a thing that I call co-meditation. It's a technique of meditating with another person through language. And I do ongoing groups, online, offline, and retreats and work.
Cool. So I will leave everything in the show notes. So for people who are curious, I encourage you to visit Sean's website. You do most of the stuff in Vienna, but you're also traveling, no?
I travel a lot in Vienna and some online stuff, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I encourage people to get in touch with you. And thank you for coming and showing up. And for this beautiful conversation. And until the next one.
Yeah.
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.